Hey everyone, James from TeaDB here. Thank you everyone for sending in questions for my Q&A episode. Here are the answers. So first going to start off on more of the casual questions and then get into maybe some of the more deeper questions as far as like Pu'erh and stuff like that is concerned. Unsurprisingly, because it also is just a Q&A with me, it's very Pu'erh-centric T questions. But yeah, I skipped a couple of these that I didn't find to be super relevant, but I am answering probably 80% of them. Okay, this is from Arvid. I'm interested in what breakdown is for viewership in regards to country and age on the TeaDB YouTube channel. So I did look this up beforehand. It's about 45% US, 5% Canadian, and then the majority of the rest is various places in Europe, very, very small amount in Asia. So unsurprisingly, dominated with North America and Europe. This one is from IU Kino. What daily drinker ripes, Pu'erh or Heicha, would you recommend? I've been getting back into tea, and I found that ripes always give a satisfying, robust taste that can be missing in other teas like Taiwanese oolongs. For example, I have enjoyed loose, non-cake ripes like this Palace Pu'erh from TeaDB. I am not familiar with TeaDB, but for me, at least, if I want just something really reliable as far as like a ripe is concerned, I usually go for Menghai Tea Factory. I think there's a reason they're the standard. They're consistent. I find they're more consistent than other factories, and the price is usually not too high at all either. So I would say Menghai Tea Factory is where I would personally go. Daily drinkers too is kind of like, it's just very inherently a personal thing. It's like, what will we drink that is pretty affordable and is something that we can drink a bunch of. It can vary per person. Maybe someone will find more mileage with a certain vendor's boutique, and maybe it's like white teas resonates and Yunnan sourcing doesn't, or Yunnan sourcing does and white tea doesn't. It's just going to vary person to person too, and I think that's fine. So this is from Hungry Ham. What are your current favorite teas, preferably available to buy online? I've talked about most of the teas that I do drink regularly. I don't know if I have current favorites so much. I mean, I've been drinking tea quite some time now, so these are more just like teas I'll have regularly. I like the Yongqing Hao Linga, Tea Home Shanlei Shi. I drink Wuyi from Wuyi Origin pretty regularly. I've always been a fan of the Wistaria teas. I think most of those are available. I know Tea Home has a new site, so that's kind of cool if you are into that. They're Taiwanese oolongs. Because it's, I think, closer to the source. They're just generally pretty affordable. So I've recommended them a lot. I don't know how many people actually buy from them, but it is now easier than ever to purchase from them. If you had to choose, what is the tastiest tea you've ever had? One very memorable session I had with Andrew in California was 1970s Yellow Mark. That one always crosses my mind. I've had some other sessions in Malaysia. I had some really, really tasty, very old tea that's from the 20s and 30s. So those were very memorable. I mean, a lot of tea comes into the anticipation and how you appreciate it. So certainly like the rarity and scarcity of those teas is probably playing some part into it. But those were some very, very memorable tea sessions. Okay, this one's from Jan, I think. I've got a couple questions. What's coming first, episode 400 or Denisodes? Probably episode 400. Also, do you have a system for budgeting tea-related expenses? I find that my tea-related spending is impulsive and maybe not as effective as it could be. Can you estimate your tea to tea-wear ratio in terms of total money spent? I mean, I don't currently have a budgeting system for tea-related expenses. I have in the past. And I wouldn't say I'm a shining example at all because I did a poor job of sticking to those. If you don't stick to your budgeting, there's really not much of a point in doing it. If you do set something, it's going to be a personal decision and something that you can stick by, and you are not going to like create all these exceptions to break rules and stuff like that. Tea to tea wear ratio in terms of total money spent. I, as might be unsurprising to people, I skew heavily towards the tea category. I think unless you are, I don't know, different people get different enjoyments from different things. So I'd probably say 100 to 1 in terms of tea to teaware over the course of this. I don't think I've spent more than like $30 or $40 on teaware in the last like 7 years. So I don't know. I guess you'd have to be calculating my top line as far as tea goes to do that. But bottom line is I spend very, very little on teaware. I still buy some tea. This is from Xiaguan. How do you hope to see the Western Pu'erh drinking community grow? What would you like to see more and less of? I don't know. I don't put certain expectations on stuff like that. Really, the community is going to go where it's going to go. What I like to do in TeaDB is, I don't know, represent certain categories of tea that I feel aren't represented as much, and try to talk those up a bit. In the past, that's been more semi-aged Pu'erh and traditionally stored Pu'erh too. Those are categories of tea that I also like. So, you know, it's sort of my personal imprint. I don't know if I expect or want it to go that way, but I'd like to just see a little more representation in that stuff. And, you know, I think in general it has sort of moved that way. Things like Xiaguan are now available, which I'm quite happy about. This is from Green League. Have you ever tried East Frisian tea? Are you interested in non-East Asian tea cultures? No, I am not. David Stokes, I'm new to choosing ripe cakes and was recently told that older shoes are not necessarily better. I've been buying shoe from West China Tea as well as Yunnan sourcing their personal brand and white tea, and my experience has been great so far. I am, however, looking to buy some cakes from earlier than 2015 that aren't directly Wise brand but are sourced from Yunnan sourcing. Some looked interesting, though I couldn't tell if they were good quality or not. In your experience, what is a good way of determining whether a shoe's quality is good or not? Does it depend on the way, or what way I think is what they mean? How would I be able to tell a quality shoe Pu'erh from one that wasn't quality? You just have to try the tea. Yunnan sourcing, I think, is pretty consistent as far as their quality, in my view at least, on ripes. So I think most of the stuff they source is going to be perfectly fine. I would encourage anyone that is looking to get an aged shoe experience. You could get the reference experience with something that's a little more dryer stored. But for it really to have an impact on the tea, I think you need like that wetter storage. So I would encourage people to check out more humid stored ripe too. You could probably find some of those on Yunnan sourcing. I also recommend Yuan Tea, who is based in Hong Kong and sort of specializes in that Hong Kong traditional storage. Okay, this one is from Luke. Hi James, I would like to know some guidance for those fresh noobs who are just tipping their toes into mid-aged, aged and Hong Kong stored Pu'erh scene. Do you recommend just start with Dai 7532 and Xiaguan 8653 cakes as references, and then go from there based on which taste profiles you prefer? There are so many factory-based offers on TWL and King Tmall. I'm afraid to buy too many samples from other factories and then later dispose them. So yeah, this is a good question. I think storage is definitely something that you should keep in mind and is important. Probably the first thing I'd recommend is determine that what type of storage is your preference. If you are more of a Kunming person or if you like wetter storage. I think most people that are into factory, well, I don't know. I don't want to generalize too much. My experience is that most people that I run into that have been drinking a while tend to prefer factory tea that's at least stored dryly in Guangzhou and Menghai versus Kunming. That's my experience with talking to people. That's also my personal preference. It's possible that people do like those teas Kunming stored, but they tend to start out rough and then move in that direction. So I'd recommend determining that preference first of all. You also don't need to sample everything. I would say as far as like the tier 1 teas from Menghai and Xiaguan to try 7542, 8582, and then from Xiaguan 8653 and maybe a Jiaji tool or something like that. Outer tier stuff like 7532, 8673, and other tools. So you could just start with a very short list like that and try a couple samples from them. It's good to get like multiple samples from 7542, for instance, just in case one is kind of, I don't know, storage, your mileage will always vary a little bit. And so I've liked some 2005 7542, and I've liked some 2005 7542 less. in my experience with it. So, you know, it can vary a bit. But you don't need to go too wild. You don't need to order hundreds of samples. You could probably order 2 different 7542s, 2 different 8582 samples, 2 or 3 different 8653 samples. My view also is that Xiaguan is a lot more variable than Menghai tea factories. So with there, you might need to order just a little bit more as far as samples go. King Tea Mall, teas we like, perfectly good places to sample from. So I think you're already looking in the right areas there. This one is from Stefan. He says, seeing your tools of Xiaguan in the background, what's your idea on factory tea versus smaller pressings of Xiang at similar prices? I often hear factory tea is overpriced, but for many, Xiaguan and Dai Xiang is pressed at under 15 cents a gram, some under 10 cents a gram from US and Canadian shippers. This seems unfounded unless they're just not worth it. Your idea on reliability and consistency. Drinkability now for 2018, 17, 16, 15 teas. Aging improvement in medium near term, 5 years. Thank you. So, yes, I agree. I think anyone that says factory teas are overpriced, I think it depends what they're talking about. I think that's a dubious statement to start with. It's possible they're talking about teas that are older than 2004, and it's true. The price as you go further back is going to really jump up, especially when you're talking about 2004. Those are much scarcer productions, so there's a lot of dynamics at play. They are in general better as well, but those teas are going to be much more pricey. But if you compare the price of factory tea that's even just from the mid to late aughts versus like boutique Pu'erh that's being produced in the same time range, I will personally take the factory tea. I think it's better. Personally for me, I think factory tea does benefit from extra time. So I would look for around 2012 at maybe the absolute youngest, ideally even a little bit older than that. Once you get kind of in that 2005 range, you will see the price start to jump, but you could still find 2006, 2007, 2008 teas for, in my view, pretty reasonable prices that are often cheaper than most of like the average price of a boutique Yangsheng these days. Also, I would say one thing to definitely keep in mind too, as well as age, is where they've been stored. I think if you're looking for actual maturation and stuff, which these teas benefit from, look for those Guangzhou, Guangdong, Malaysia, Taiwan stored teas, places like Teas We Like and King Tea Mall, which were just mentioned in the previous place, are probably good places to seek that out. So yeah, sample some stuff. I don't think factory tea is overpriced at all. You know, there are certain factory teas that are overpriced, but on the average, I don't think that's true. Things like the really special productions and, as I said earlier, the older teas. The older teas, I think it's kind of up for more debate, but things like Gold Dye from 2011, stuff like that, can be really, really pricey, but are also not at all representative of factory tea. And there's always occasionally some production, and I would encourage people not to read too much into that as an overall industry trend, when I think it's pretty obvious that you can find teas that are mid-aged and stuff like that and that are not as hyped and are perfectly fine factory teas for much cheaper. So, you know, you can cherry pick certain data, but I think that's, I don't know. It seems like a very incorrect statement to me. Okay, this one's from Jugpan. What's the difference between aging Pu'erh and storing it? Also not a question, but could you please update the stores you buy from on Taobao? Need more. Sadly, I don't buy from Taobao that much. Well, sadly or not sadly. MXT is definitely one that I normally buy from. I don't know. That's the one I always shout out. So, sorry, Jugpan, I'm not providing too much new information. Definitely more of a Xiaguan specialist there. King Tea Mall, I mean, it's a Taobao reseller too, but their markup is, at least historically, has not been too high. So they're a decent place to that sort of combines a bunch of Taobao shops. I've heard of some people finding the actual source behind that too. I don't know what it is, but you could probably do some deep web research and figure what that is. Okay, in terms of aging versus storing it, I think with aging, the shift is more towards maturing the tea. Storing it, I think, implies more just trying to get by. Obviously, there's overlap in those two, but I think that's kind of generally how I read that term. If people are talking about aging versus storing and how they're different. So aging, it's more just like how are you maturing the tea. Storage, just more the implication is like less on like I want to preserve this tea, and what are my best ways to do that. So I think the goals are just slightly different. Okay, this is from Tom. Hi James, what are your views on sheng changing in taste over the course of a session from steep to steep? I am of the opinion that it is often overemphasized by tea drinkers, and not to mention our tastes will be influenced by prior steeps, which I've always found makes it hard to truly separate, say, steep 5 from 6. Thanks. Yeah, it depends. I'd say Pu'erh, yeah, I don't think it changes all that much. Obviously, it also depends a lot on how you brew. If you brew steep 3 for 5 seconds and then steep 4 you brew for 2 minutes, you're going to get very different steeps. So, I mean, a lot of the value of brewing in these small vessels, too, allows you to just sort of react to how the previous steep goes. So it just depends on how you're brewing as well. But yeah, my experience, my view is that like something like yancha can really change and evolve over the course of a session, often very quick, steep to steep. Raw Pu'erh, probably less so. Again, very tea dependent as well, but my view is that it doesn't change as much. So I guess I generally agree with that. This is from JP. I recently received some very disappointing roasted Mujia Xiaguan from a vendor, but it really wasn't any good, zero aroma and very thin, and I now have 100 grams of undrinkable tea. Do you have any recommendations for decent charcoal roasted TGY? Not really. It's not a tea in my regular rotation. I can recommend the roasted oolong from Tea Home. They might have some Xiaguan. And that I don't have a great recommendation. Sorry. This is from NK Mentner. What do you think about ripe Pu'erh with wetter storage notes? How easily can you distinguish between the fermented Wadway and potential humid storage on an aged ripe? I mean, if the ripe is aged, then it's not the fermented Wadway. So I'd say context clues will reveal that. If you're having it in more of a blind tasting context, then I don't know. They taste different. I would struggle to know how to describe it. They're all kind of in that interesting fermented wet wood category. So I don't know exactly how to describe the difference. But yeah, I mean, humid storage from like traditional storage on a ripe will taste different than the Wadway that you'll get from freshly piled Pu'erh. What do you think about ripe Pu'erh with those notes? I like it. I think Yian is a good example of stuff with sort of that like ginseng traditional Chinese medicine taste. Personally, I really dig that. I don't think it's for everyone, but I really like that taste, and so much so that it's become kind of my norm for ripe tea. Okay, this one also from NK Mediter. When you did Luan and Tianjin on the show, you kept mentioning how they had similar notes to Wu Yancha. What about the production process of those heichas could make those similar to Yancha in flavor notes? I think some heicha are actually roasted. Obviously, something with Yancha is very important is terroir. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with processing of, in particular, those heicha to really say. And processing is not necessarily my specialty either. So that's just kind of a quick judgment call. So this one is from Annie. Should we keep cakes that are open to a minimum, or does breaking off some chunks from a cake not affect its storage and long-term quality? Should we try to finish off cakes we start within a certain time frame? Totally up to you. Totally up to you. I think a lot depends on your ambient conditions. If you determine that your ambient conditions will degrade the cake and dry it out super fast, like you're living in like 25-30 relative humidity and like hot, then yeah, maybe not a great idea to open too many cakes, but it depends on what your sort of deeper storage and short-term storage is too. Also depends on sort of your tolerance for messiness and tidiness. If you're someone that is very tidy and only likes to have like a few cakes open at once and don't mind just drinking through them, all the more power to you. If you don't mind, it's fine too. So I don't know. Up to you. Okay, so we have a bunch of questions from Anthony. All right, from Anthony. With a large stash of various teas, how do you decide on the tea you're going to drink each day? I know you like to have ripe in the morning, but what about your other sessions? Do you ever find yourself having difficulty to decide what tea? I mean, I just make a decision. I have some idea. I mean, I'll think about it for a little bit, but I don't like. I don't know. I know some people. I mean, choosing like what to watch on Netflix can be a whole ordeal. I don't know. I just kind of pick, and I have a regular rotation of stuff that's easily accessible in this fridge right here, and I will usually just pull from something like that or a sample. I'll probably make the decision in about 30 seconds. I don't know. I don't think too hard about it. There are more days, and I will have other times to make a decision. Sometimes I'll have something in mind before I start, other times less so. But usually I don't have a hard time making a decision now. 2, has your tea preference changed over time in terms of flavor profiles, or has it remained pretty constant? It's changed, and I've written about this in the past. There's a lot of tea categories that I like on paper, but I've determined that they just don't really pass the speed test. So I'd say that I just don't really care for those types of teas. So yeah, I mean, I like semi-aged and older Shang Pu'erh. I like aged oolongs. I like a wee yancha. And I like a little bit of roasted oolong. And those are the teas I tend to drink. And I drink very, very little greener tea or green tea. And so those, I guess, are teas I can enjoy when I have them, but I really don't. I have no reason to seek them out. Okay, 3. How does the general chi of a tea affect your rating? It impacts it, yeah. It's one of many attributes to a tea. Okay, 4. What is the ultralight test? Ultralight backpacking is something Denny does where they go backpacking, I guess, with just very minimal gear. So ultralight is, would this be a good tea to brew in such an experience? So yeah, we've talked about it a lot of times. But yeah, that's what it actually means. I don't know how many times we spelled it out. What's the highest you rated a tea out of 10? Let's see on the show what that would be. I can load my rating spreadsheet, which is public. And let's see. So I rated a ripe as high as 8.2, it looks like, a couple of them. And let's see, in terms of raw, have I rated anything that high? Does not look like it. So I've given some 7.3, 7.7. I've given 7.7 to the Ching Tung. So 7.7 on the show is what I've given a raw Pu'erh. So 7.78, I'd probably give up to a 9 or 10, depending on it. If you were to place dollar per gram to personal enjoyment of a tea on a graph, at which point for you would that relationship become asymptotic and not worth the money for each category of tea? I'm mainly curious in young, semi-aged, and aged sheng and yancha, but would be cool to see your analysis on each category. Budgets differ. For him, anything past 40 cents a gram for show is not really worth it. It's interesting. It's hard to quantify personal enjoyment so much. For me, I never want to drink young sheng, so my price limit is I don't want to drink anything $0 a gram or more. You could give me the stuff for free, and I'd probably rather drink other stuff, even if it's really high quality. Sometimes it's interesting to try in a session with other people, but yeah, I don't drink young sheng. Semi-aged sheng, very diverse category on its own. I tend to do most of my buying in 20 cents a gram to maybe 35 cents a gram or so. I will occasionally buy teas that are a little more expensive, but not very regularly, so definitely some diminishing returns there. So I'm mainly buying in that sort of mid-range category. Aged sheng for me tends to be traditionally stored, like ripe replacement type stuff, so usually I'm not spending a whole lot on that either. Probably in that 25 cents a gram range or so. Yancha, you know, I'm willing to spend up a little bit on Yancha. I'd be willing to spend up to $1 a gram on that, depending on how the tea is. It has the benefit of coming loose, and a really good Yancha is hard to replace. So, yeah, like there are young teas I'd rate like a 7, but I'd probably never want to drink, so I'm not willing to spend money on something like that. So everyone differs a little bit on those teas, but that's probably about where I come in on price. This is from Ward de Ritter. Can aged white tea benefit from burning in an Yixing teapot? Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Yixing teapots are magic or anything like that, but I do like a lot of teas better in Yixing and clay. It's a complicated dynamic. I think earlier on I thought it was mostly due to heat retention. I no longer believe that. But yeah, you can absolutely do better. Aged white tea, in general, clay will probably mute, especially those higher notes, and aged white tea doesn't necessarily have a lot of higher notes. Aged tea in general doesn't. So having something like that, I could see it doing just fine. Do I have experience doing that? No, but I'm judging it more intuitively, I guess. And this is the last question from Flaw Form. What are some sources that talk about Pu'erh in depth or tea in general that you'd recommend? I'm looking to learn more about the history of some of the factories and some other stuff in general. Definitely recommend Marshallin.com. That's probably the site that I learned the most of starting out. In terms of books, I like the Zhang Jinghong book, Pu'erh, Ancient Caravans, Urban Chic. It's written from sort of an anthropological perspective, so, you know, if that's not your thing, then that's fine, but that's probably the book I've gotten the most out of. Other than that, I don't know that there's a ton of tea books on Pu'erh that have ended up being super appealing. Not something I've taken a deep dive or anything like that about. But yeah, Marshallin.com, I strongly recommend reading that start to finish. Just a lot of interesting information, both on Pu'erh and other tea topics as well. So yeah. Well, thank you all for writing in the questions. Let me know how you liked the episode, and I'll probably be doing another one of these in about another half a year or so, and I will see you all next time. Cheers.